Oh dear. And you can hear us, and you're just this little postage stamp of a picture on my screen.
Yeah, I see him down there. I see him down there on my phone, but
Oh, oh.
Dolly is no longer presenting.
I got worried for a second. Presenting what? How was that? What? What's happening?
The first silent podcast of the.
Dali has a wonderful plumage.
Hey, he's having you take the reins, so you better
Oh my God.
start.
All right. 30 minutes. Okay. All right. So this is it. All right. Okay. 3, 2, 1. And welcome to the Side Questing Wrestling Podcast with me, your host, at this time, John. I have audio Kehoe. I'm also joined. Oh, I heard a laugh.
Wait,
Wait, what?
I heard a laugh too.
You're in.
Oh my God! How did that happen?
What happened?
What just happened? It's
We've
a
been-
Christmas miracle.
So everybody at home, we've been sitting here for the last 5 minutes trying to figure out why Dali didn't have any audio, any microphone at all.
It was not working. I totally swear. I'm trying to, and I've plugged it into every single USB port. Oh my Lord! And so I had officially handed the podcast off to John and JJ and said, "You guys take over. I'll just be your audience."
I was about to have the glory, and then nope.
Yep. Oh man, maybe I'm not a deserving champion. That's just got to be it. But anyways, welcome everybody to the 14th episode. Somehow the 14th episode of SQW. We would have started a lot earlier, but due to technical issues on my end.
If we had known all we had to do was start to get you to start talking, I guess.
Yeah.
I was like clicking every button. I even tried presenting. I don't know what I was presenting, but I tried presenting something. Anyways, I'm Dali. I'm sometimes Dali Domovsky. I am the current champion, although I don't know if I deserve it right now. We do have WWE Roadblock this weekend, so perhaps we can make some quick predictions for that, and then
Sure.
we'll do that after our main topic. And joining me as always, the person who I was going to hand off the reins to the show today, John Kehoe.
The former legit boss, yeah.
The former, that was the biggest heel turn. Like I gave you it's like Vince giving Daniel Bryan the commissionership only to yank it away at the last second.
It was the dusty start of the podcast.
Yeah, it was the Montreal screw job. Yeah, exactly. And also the wonderful JJ Holder. You get to be the wonderful one today.
I get to be the wonderful one. Always a contender, never a champion.
Mr. Wonderful.
Mr. Wonderful. Mr. Wonderful. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Sorry for that little wait, and we had a good time leading up to it. But we're going to talk about wrestling video games as much as we can. I really only have a half hour because I got to catch Star Wars. Although it would have been a lot earlier if my computer was running well, which it wasn't. Sorry, Steve Jobs. Anyways, we're going to talk about wrestling video games, and we're going to get into some of the Roblox stuff. But let's start with wrestling video games. And this is a topic that we've wanted to talk about for a long time. I'm going to tweet the link out to everybody. And I did get a lot of awesome feedback from people, by the way. Thank you to our followers on Twitter and in our YouTube channel and stuff for giving us suggestions for some of their favorite games, and we'll talk about those here shortly. But wrestling games have been around almost as long as video games in general.
You know, I was just doing research yesterday night just to see what I might have missed in the past, and boy, it was a lot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a natural fit, right?
Yeah.
It is an actual fix. Even all the way back to things like the NES, or I'm sorry, not even the NES, the Atari 2600. There were like boxing and wrestling games, and
like
even well before then.
You see so many like in Europe and Japan and stuff like Amiga games and stuff that existed and popped in and out of like from time to time, like things that I never heard of before, based on like, oh wow, just an all Japan pro wrestling game on computers in the mid '80s or something. Like it's like, oh wow.
What's interesting is kind of and I did a super brief look at the history of wrestling video games, and by golly, one of the really interesting things looking at that Atari 2600 era and that early NES era was how boxing games influenced wrestling games. I think one of the things, and I forget the name of the actual boxing game for the Atari, but it was like this top-down boxer thing, and I think they ended up converting that to a full-on wrestling game, which was kind of cool. So
yeah.
But yeah, it goes way back, and even stuff like Punch Out, they're wrestling style characters, so that's always pretty awesome. But let's get into let's kind of talk about some of our favorites and go from there. And JJ, did you were putting a list together of some of them, right?
Yeah, I started piecing up like games that I had played or remembered very well, or that are kind of considered universally loved and what have you, and sort of the history behind that a bit. But
how far back does your gaming legacy go with wrestling, with either wrestling games or video games in general?
The NES is where it all sort of started off. Like,
okay,
I played the Atari at my grandfather's house, but but NES, like I did, like I can't remember if it was NES Pro Wrestling or the WrestleMania game that was the first.
Oh god, there were some great ones.
Yeah, that WrestleMania game's not one of them.
No, it's not great.
No, it's not. What's kind of interesting about it is that I thought that was going to be I'm like, oh great, the first like WWE wrestling and
licensed.
Who was that bad?
Yeah, I'm fairly certain I was dead set to convince myself that it was a good game.
Yeah,
like it had to be because it's wrestling. It must be good.
WWF.
Like I from the get go, I loved NES Pro Wrestling. The Nintendo developed pro wrestling game. That game's real charming. It's like the cast of characters stuck with me.
Oh, it's great.
Starman and the Amazon and stuff.
Yep.
Like that. They're just like, it's amazing to me that Nintendo hasn't tried to cash in on any of that.
Right. And to me, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, we got a Punch Out revival, but like that game is just the right for the pickings is that, especially considering how popular wrestling is compared to boxing. Like it's
one of my favorite. I mean, you look at that, and that was a big precursor to like a lot of the Street Fighters, like a lot of the fighting games, right? Because you had, you had obviously characters from around the world, like Giant Panther and Great Puma and King Corn Karn, and then you had Starman. You had the Amazon, which is you look at like characters like Blanca and so on. I mean, there were
they
some...
all had like unique move sets, like special moves. Like they all shared sort of similar moves, but they all had unique move sets amongst one of them. Like, it really was sort of like a really good sort of early example of a fighting game.
I think I was always the Amazon, because when you did the bite move, I mean, it was like you hear the chomp, 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 and the other player they're helpless. They have to watch that stupid animation. That awesome animation go through, because it took like seconds off the clock to do it.
Yeah.
But Starman in that game, I mean, that had to have influenced Cody Rhodes in the design of Starman.
Yeah, right. Possibly,
like,
I mean, just change the color scheme, and it's there. It's completely there.
If he ever decided to wear pink, it would have been blatantly obvious. Like, but I mean, and his connection to video games is very well.
Yes,
I mean, like his boots had the Triforce on them. Like that was his thing. Like, so I'm sure it wasn't an accident. Like,
no,
I'm sure someone came up with the idea of what if gold dust but space, and then he took it from there.
There was WWF's WrestleMania, Pro Wrestling. Were there other? What's that?
WCW had one on the.
Did they really? They had WCW had a wrestling game on the NES.
Did they?
Yes, they did.
I didn't know that.
I did not know that.
The Road Warriors were the cover athletes. So.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, it's actually a pretty good game.
Is it really?
It's not. It's not fantastic, but it's. I mean, it's cool.
FCI created that game. Okay, I see it now. Yeah, the company named FCI, which I briefly remember.
What was it called? It was like the main. Was it the main event? I think. No, that was the game.
No, it was called WCW World Championship Wrestling, and the Road Warriors were the cover athletes.
Yeah, I see the cover art there. I do seem to.
Yeah,
I remember that, but I don't know. I don't know if I ever really played it.
I don't think I ever played it. The cool thing was that there was a lot of like really well-known wrestlers. You had Hawk and Animal. You had Mike Rotundo, Lex Luger, Sting, Ric Flair, Kevin Sullivan, Ricky Steamboat. I mean, Rick Steiner. I mean, that's an awesome roster of wrestlers.
Yeah, it was.
It's not bad, actually.
Yeah, and it was better than the WWF game by a long shot. They had finishing moves and everything. Like,
wow.
Like, it was kind of, it was neat. It was a neat little thing. I mean, like I said, it's not the greatest, but like, it's for the NES, what they had for a licensed game in particular. It was
and it was based on a Japanese game known as Superstar Pro Wrestling. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page right now.
There is doing research, I just realized that like every game that we ever got is just a Japanese game.
Yes, like, correct.
There's so many arcade games and stuff that we never saw, but like if we did see, they were able to license WWF for this game. Like, speaking of arcade games, WWF WrestleFest.
WWF WrestleFest. So that was the arcade one. That I actually liked that one.
That was
they
remade that game a few years ago for iOS.
Did they really?
Roster. Yeah, you can't get it anymore. It's
no, that's a bummer.
Yeah, but it looked like the game. It sort of played like the game, but it had a modern roster for like 2012 or something. So
yeah, I remember that game. I remember playing that game when I was a kid. We were on a ferry ride from Newfoundland going over to Nova Scotia, and they had it in the little tiny arcade, and that was in there. And I remember on that ride there and back, I played the heck out of that game.
Yeah, it's a good arcade game. Like, it plays really well, and and it's nice to like you can tell who's who. That was sort of a major problem on NES games at the time.
Yes,
everyone just kind of looked the same, unless it was Andre the Giant.
Right.
It was about the only character that really stood out. Even Hulk Hogan kind of looked like generic everyone else on the roster. So, but in WrestleFest, everyone looked like exactly like who they were supposed to.
Well, the art was great.
Yeah,
the art was fantastic.
Big, huge characters, sprites, and stuff. It was cool.
So the great thing about this is it was in the era of Street Fighter. It was in the era where there was like those the NHL and the NFL and NBA jams. So it was that kind of the bigger character take up the full screen. 16-bit or 24-bit, whatever. And
I think the WrestleFest was a Technos game.
Yeah, it's Technos. Yeah.
So it would have been the Double Dragon guys and stuff. So it's like they knew, they knew what they were doing.
It looks really cool. I had forgotten about this too. And there were 2 modes available. Saturday night's main event.
Yeah. Disappointing it's disappointing that it's like licensed kind of thing, because that's a game that would be really interesting. Like, it's like wrestling games don't have a shelf life.
Yep, that's exactly it.
No, that's right.
Exactly.
You can't there's so many contracts involved and stuff that would involve like just individual wrestler likenesses and things that probably get this stuff held up. So
I mean,
you're like the Simpsons arcade game where there might be some hiccups here or there, but eventually it'll find its way somewhere, or the X-Men arcade game or something. But
it is a total shame because and we're gonna get through a bunch here, but that game would be fantastic. Again here, obviously THQ. We'll get to more THQ stuff, but they were able to save it for iOS for a bit. But it's the licensing has got to be killer. That's why you don't see any classic sports games.
Yeah.
Back again.
Yeah. Like yeah, Tecmo Bowl has to go, like when they re-release a Tecmo Bowl game, it has to be sort of the pre-NFL license or whatever.
Yeah,
Right.
pre-NFL license, or you have to go individually look for other license. Yeah, it's a trying endeavor, that's for sure.
So it's like yeah, we'd all love to play the original NBA Jam again, but that
Yep.
never happened. So here's
Nope.
here's what we think NBA Jam is like today, and you know, you get that was a fine game,
But we got big head mode.
yeah.
That's right.
So yeah, so the NES, the Super NES, we had a few decent Super NES wrestling games. I don't remember the Super NES era all that much.
They don't hold up very well, but I liked the like WrestleMania, the arcade game, a lot.
Yeah.
But it doesn't play like a wrestling game.
Wasn't there like a Royal Rumble game as well?
There was a Royal Rumble. They had Royal Rumble, and Raw was another one.
And Super Fire Pro Wrestling and all that stuff.
Yeah, Fire Pro Wrestling is such a good franchise. Like
yeah.
The PlayStation 2 game of Fire Pro Wrestling Returns is a personal favorite of mine. They're super customizable. But I think
WCW Super Brawl.
Yeah,
that was also a.
I know that game exists, but I don't remember playing it. I know I did, but
I think I remember playing it like one time. Right.
Yeah, I like but I was looking at the WWF arcade game yesterday, and on my Twitter, you'll see that I posted a couple of screenshots from the endings.
Oh.
And it was Razor Ramon's ending for the WrestleMania.
Oh man.
And it is dark. Like he won
Really?
the championship, and so he went back to Cuba to show off.
I just retweeted it.
Yeah, and like so, but eventually, like becomes a motivational speaker, but then he gets mugged. They beat him up, steal the title and all of his gold, and break his fingers. He becomes depressed, becomes an
motivational speaker. But you know,
how long does the ending go on for?
Is it a fake in-game thing? Because that's the actual stuff that happened to Scott Hall.
Yeah, well, with the exception, I mean, maybe he owned a pawn shop in Chile. I don't know. But they're all like that. Like like Yokozuna wins the championship and like crushes America. Like, you know.
This is amazing.
Like if you can find the endings to these games, they're all just super dark. Like the Undertaker just straight up dies in his game. Like his soul can finally come to rest or whatever. Like it's just super
holy
weird.
cow, those are awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
It writes it out. Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
I thought it was like a video.
Yeah, like this. Yeah, no, yeah, it's like those. It's like the old style arcade games, sort of like Mortal Kombat's endings, where it's all mostly text with a picture of Razor Ramon on it. So they're if you can find that stuff, I'm trying to think. Like VG Museum is where I found a lot of this.
Okay,
stuff. Right. They have all the endings there, and they're all that great. But I think the Razor Ramon one stuck out to me the most.
Wow.
I'm saving all those images.
Yeah, and that's one of those games that like everyone was goofy in it. Like you punch Yokozuna and fish comes flying out of him.
Oh yeah, and razors fall out of Razor Ramon. And
yeah, and like Lex Luger it's smack dab in the middle of like ultra American Lex Express style Lex Luger.
Yeah. Yeah, and like Bam Bam Bigelow was actually on fire when he would do moves. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that was in Bam Bam Bigelow's. It implies that his fiery moves killed a good chunk of the people in the arena.
Oh.
So that's good.
Oh boy,
those are good. And then they went on to they've made a sequel to that one.
Did they really? Oh.
Yeah, In Your House.
But not nearly as dark. I take it.
Not nearly as dark. Although it did have like fatality moves, like like. You would pull in Shawn Michaels' fatality move and the Heartbreak Hotel segment that he used to do. Like the bed would just come and crush the opponent. Like that was. That was the feeling era because you couldn't really make a Madden-like game out of wrestling at the time. So it's like, well, let's just do this instead.
Oh boy, the British Bulldog's head actually turned into a dog.
Turned into a dog.
Yeah. I think I actually remember that.
Yeah. That was an early, like it was on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo, but it was also like a super early PlayStation 1 game. So,
yeah, not great times for graphics.
No.
Mm.
Well, that was back. They were still doing that Mortal Kombat thing where they were just taking digitized images of the wrestlers and just sort of animating them. So
That was the VR of its time.
yeah.
It's lifelike because we can use the actual people in the game.
But the PlayStation 1 sort of had the game that sort of kicked off sort of what would become some of the better wrestling games, because they had WCW versus the World, which is, everyone knows, like, WCW, NWO World Tour, WCW Revenge, WWF. It's all the virtual pro wrestling stuff, as it would be in Japan. And that was sort of the start of it. That was like the first virtual pro wrestling game, was WCW versus the World, and it's mostly the World,
mostly the World,
WCW in it, and like that's like that style game, what would eventually become like World Tour and Revenge on the Nintendo 64, is what a lot of people will go back to. And when you ask people what their favorite wrestling game is, it will be one of those 4 games, like usually Revenge or No Mercy.
I hear No Mercy all the time. But so this was the era to me that wrestling games really became a thing. I mean, I played it more on the N64.
Yeah.
But this, definitely the era.
Because the games that the PlayStation got were a little more fighting game-esque. Like, it was more, because the thing that was about the Nintendo 64 games is that they took out the American part of professional wrestling, kind of. That was sort of the thing with them. Like, it didn't have the sort of showmanship, like it was less sports entertainment, more wrestling.
Yep.
Like when you get to the PlayStation 1, where they had like WWF Attitude and Warzone, where it was like button combinations and like, you know, commentary and like catchphrases and like all the pyro and high-end sort of graphics and things. Like, you know, they were going for the "this is WWF," while No Mercy or Revenge were more going for "this is professional wrestling." Like,
like
which makes the difference. It really makes the difference, because even the PlayStation 1 WCW game was terrible. With Nitro and Thunder, like, the best part of those games was the character select screen. If you pushed a circle button, it would give they would have a video of them come up in their character select screen telling you why to pick them. That was,
the N64 and PS1 era of even just video games in general, I really didn't play a lot of that stuff. Mostly, I was in that period where I was just finishing high school, getting into university, and my time was spent studying and drinking a lot of beer. So,
and what has changed since then, my friend?
I've added a few more video games.
Exactly.
But so I kind of missed out on a lot of that No Mercy Revenge era. I did play like a little bit of Attitude and a little bit of another one of the WWE ones or WWF ones.
no, you had Attitude and Warzone.
Yeah. But I'm a self-confessed poor player of fighting games in general, so I was never any good at them either, and so that kind of deterred me. I was like, I don't need this stuff. So
I hated the PlayStation.
I waited a generation.
Games. I hated the PlayStation 1 games a lot. Like, I played the hell out of them, but I hated them because I don't like memorizing like needlessly long button combos. Like, it did the Mortal Kombat thing where it was like forward, back, forward. Like, it wasn't like Street Fighter where you're doing like quarter circles and stuff. You had to have very direct button inputs. Like, oh, you want to do a DDT? It's forward, back, forward, X or something. It's like, that's not really, I don't feel like I'm wrestling. Like,
that's what turned me off. That's what turned me off as well.
That's why the Nintendo became a fighting game. It was all sort of chain wrestling on the Nintendo 64 side. It was all everything came out of a grapple. Like, it was, and that's sort of why people go to those ones. Like, it feels like you're professional, like you're doing professional wrestling. You're chaining together moves. It's slower. It's not. They're not fast games at all.
No, not the N64 ones. No. And I think that one of the reasons that there were so many, and that started the whole annualization of wrestling. As a thing for video games. That was during the Monday Night Wars, right? So that whole era was fueling the video games and just the whole the era of big wrestling and big TV wrestling. And so you had WCW would put out as many games as possible, like two a year sometimes.
Yeah.
WWF, same thing, 2 a year sometimes.
Yeah, and it was also during that, it was that weird thing where each system got like their own like unique thing going on. Like the WCW games on the Nintendo 64 were different from the WCW games on the PlayStation 1. Same thing with the WWF games. And that kind of kept doing that straight through the original Xbox.
Yes, yeah.
Because the Xbox didn't have the Smackdown series, but they had the Raw series or the WrestleMania series, and they were never like one was always exponentially better than the other, like constantly, and it was always like it was a weird time.
It was, and the crazy thing. So we had an N64 and a PS1 in our dorm room throughout. The late 90s, right? So we would watch, or before the Monday Night Wrestling would come on, either Raw or Nitro, we'd play some of the games just to kind of get into the mood, and then we'd play afterwards because those shows would end at like 11:30 sometimes, so you're playing until 1 o'clock in the morning instead of studying like you should be.
The Nintendo 64 games were very, very good use of 4 players.
Yes, and that's exactly what kept people over was the N64 games, and mostly the WCW games in N64 because they were pretty fantastic. But
and because of the era that they're in, and we live in the era of ROMs and stuff. Those games live on forever now.
Yes, thankfully.
I could go online and download No Mercy right now, but with 2016's roster, if I really wanted to.
That's correct. Right. And those cartridges are still floating around in a lot of secondhand shops. So I think I'm going to pick up a Retron over the holidays here, just so I can plug those in and play them on my big screen and just see how bad they are. I'm looking at images of No Mercy. The 2000.
It is not even when it came out, it was not a particularly pretty game.
Right. That was the tail end of the N64, and boy, was that bad.
Yeah, it was these super blocky characters with what's very just clearly like a picture of their face on the head meat. Like, it's just like, but it just played really well. Even though it was one of those weird Nintendo 64 controller things where you didn't control them with the analog stick.
Right.
The analog stick was strictly for special moves and taunting. So it was like it was always one of those like it is one of those like where am I supposed to put my hands for this game kind of situation. But I still kind of default myself when I like every once in a while I'll find myself trying to play a 2K game with like the D-pad.
So let's move on to the next era, which was the PS2, Xbox, GameCube. I think that was the era that we started getting they were annualized up until that point, but this is when
this was like straight up Madden annualized.
Yeah, this is the Maddenizing of wrestling. So you had 2K and a couple others were definitely doing that.
Because they started the Smackdown series on the PlayStation 1, and there was a couple of them on there. And then once the PlayStation 2 hit, you got it was like all in. Like
Yep.
And the Smackdown series was definitely the premiere of them.
Yeah.
And I mean, even I played a little bit of Here Comes the Pain and what was the other one? SmackDown versus Raw.
Yes, eventually they changed the whole franchise to SmackDown versus Raw. So
the amazing part of I remember Here Comes the Pain. I played that a little bit. Wasn't there like you could elbow drop someone from a helicopter at some point? Something crazy like that.
Well, the GameCube games got super weird.
Yeah, they did.
Because they didn't get to do the SmackDown thing. So I don't know what the deal was with that. There must have been some sort of weird deal in place.
You're talking about the Day of Reckoning games, right?
The Day of Reckoning games were
that's what I played mostly.
They started off with like the WrestleMania 18 and 19, which were just kind of functional wrestling games, and then they went to Day of Reckoning, where it was story mode driven.
Yes, that was a big change to a lot of these. Was that whole story mode?
Yeah, and like Day of Reckoning ended up having this thing where it's like you have to sort of fight your way back into the WWE or WWF or whatever at the time. It would have been WWE at the time.
Probably.
But, like you're just fighting wave after wave of security guard. Like you're like on a skyscraper trying to climb up this skyscraper and security guards are coming after you and you're like you're pretty much killing these guys because you're like throwing them off the top of these skyscrapers and stuff. And I have a fondness for those games. They play really well, but they're
do.
arcade games.
Yes.
And they have good rosters in this game,
right,
because it's this weird sort of like WCW WWF combo thing going on. Like, there's a lot of, and this is when you really started getting legends in your games.
Yeah, the legends were coming in, and this is also the era where because the gaming industry was exploding, right, with disc-based media, we saw stuff like the Backyard Wrestling.
Yeah, those
remember the Insane Clown Posse.
Yep.
I think the only reason like I can even remember the Backyard Wrestling.
That was Eidos, by the way, Tomb Raider's maker.
Really?
The second Backyard Wrestling game had Andrew WK as a playable wrestler.
That's right. That's right. Well, and also don't forget the Def Jam Vendetta.
Yeah,
those
Vendetta,
are.
which was,
I remember that.
Yeah, those are literally the successors to No Mercy and stuff. Like they play pretty much the same. They're actually really good.
Yeah,
really good. And that was EA that brought those to the to publish. They published those, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I remember Def Jam having a lot of positive buzz back then.
Yeah.
Just a lot of people couldn't look past the fact that it was like a wrestling game, but with Def Jam records that slapped.
Yeah, Ludacris and DMX, Redman. Yeah. Yep.
To me, that was the greatest idea in the world.
Oh, it was awesome.
Yeah, I actually really love those games. But PlayStation 2 does have Fire Pro Wrestling Returns, like I said there. And then when that came out in North America, it was only like a $20 game, brand new, anyways. And it's actually on the PlayStation 3. You can actually download a digital version of that. And the Fire Pro Wrestling games are not for the sort of, if you're not good at video games, don't bother kind of thing. It is super sort of, it's not complicated, but it's all about sort of chaining moves together. And it's very Japanese. Like the wrestling is very New Japan feeling. Like you have to be timed perfect in order to like really be successful in that game.
Yeah,
But
I remember trying that once. Yeah, I remember trying it once, and I was like, "This is a little more technical than I'm willing to get into." Because I was used to playing Day of Reckoning and just going stunner after stunner after stunner, and everyone who would come near me.
Oh yeah, you have to, if you want to pull off a finishing move in like the Fire Pro Wrestling games, because there's also 2 really good Fire Pro Wrestling games on the Game Boy Advance that came out in North America.
Were there really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were actually. I think the first one might have been launch window for the Game Boy Advance.
Oh, interesting.
But they're super custom. Like Fire Pro Wrestling Returns is super customizable. Like you can, if you get the PlayStation 3 version, it's even easier because you can just kind of do all this stuff off of like a USB stick or something. Back in the day, you had to sort of get a little more creative. You have to get like an action replay and find websites and get. But like you can just create anything and anyone. Like this is I created the 1997 WCW roster, like ring and all. Like you look at like the ring it's got created logos and everything. Like you can make whatever you want and it's fantastic. It's one of my highest recommended wrestling games.
Did you guys play moving on to the 360 and the PS3 era? Did you guys ever play the TNA Impact game?
I played Impact, yeah.
How was that?
That was, go ahead.
It was mediocre. Like
it was Midway developed it.
Yeah,
it
felt like a 360 era Midway game.
Yeah, it did. It was like middle of the road at best.
The thing, it's amazing that they introduced, like they created the wrestler Suicide for that game.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And he became like a permanent stay on TNA Wrestling. Like he was still like TJ Perkins.
That was TJ Perkins,
yeah. So now he's WWE Cruiserweight mainstay. But that game was just. They also during that there was a AAA game on the 360.
There was.
Yeah, like super like for whatever reason they decided in North America we needed a AAA wrestling game like Lucha Libre like that's
right.
it was not good, but it's weird that it exists, and I'm glad it exists. But
Yep. It was
Lucha,
the heroes of Lucha Libre AAA Heroes of the Ring. That's right.
Yeah. That had a weird roster too, I think.
Yeah,
It had because it was like a lot of guys that you would recognize, but then also this is also Conan is on it or something.
Mm-hmm.
So that was I think that was either my first or my second E3 that I'd ever been to. that game was being promoted, and they had a big giant ring in the middle of their booth at E3, and you could go in and wrestle these luchadors for no apparent reason. You could just fans would come up and it's their turn to go in, and folks are getting injured, which is the bad part because nobody actually knows how to wrestle unless you're a wrestler.
Yeah, go figure.
I don't know if they shut it down or what, but I know people were they were walking out of there with bumps and bruises.
Wow.
I did learn while doing some research that during this time period in the PlayStation 2 and Xbox 360, they put out a Wrestle Kingdom series of games.
Oh, really?
Which, for anyone who doesn't know, Wrestle Kingdom is the January 4th New Japan major wrestling event. So every January 4th is a new Wrestle Kingdom. We're going in this January, it's Wrestle Kingdom 11, right?
I don't know.
I think so. Yeah, it is 11.
Yeah, I think it's 11. With the debut of Cody Rhodes and as a Bullet Club member.
The American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes.
The American Nightmare, yeah. But so you can actually they're built off of the Day of Reckoning engine. So they're these PlayStation 2 and Xbox 360 version, and it's it has everyone that would have been in that sort of kind of if you would have potentially been on the Wrestle Kingdom show at that time frame, you're in that game. It has Shinsuke Nakamura in the first one.
Wow, in the PS2 one, you can play Nakamura versus Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, because Lesnar was in
the
PlayStation 2 version.
He was with them for a couple shows.
Yeah.
Huh.
Didn't he win a championship? He was IWGP.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very short, small window of time that all these people would have been together at once, but it's really cool that those games exist, and I think I might actually import that first one. I didn't know it existed, and now I do, and now it's all I can think about. It's I kind of want to check. I like the Day of Reckoning games, and I like the concept of playing a Wrestle Kingdom game. So
that kind of leads us into modern wrestling games, which is essentially it's just 2K.
It is a one pony show right now.
It's a one point. I mean, there are a few that will come out either on iOS or somewhere else, but it's it's WWE 2K, and that will as we've come to learn, WWE 2K games eventually lead to main event matches at Survivor Series.
Yeah, inevitably. If you could break down or at least somebody making their return, you might get the Ultimate Warrior situation where it's he's back for the Hall of Fame, but Sting had a match, Lesnar and Goldberg had their thing going on, and
and the Rock. And, I mean, they did it for the Rock too, right?
Did it for the Rock, yep.
Yeah. So it's just I wish that there was somebody else to make a game with.
I mean, I wish that there were just other there's really only one major wrestling outfit right now. You have WWE and that's it. Yeah. But this could be a cool way for
you're starting to see Kickstarter campaigns pop up time to time nowadays. There was one recently that used a lot of they're trying to get indie guys in a game and sort of inspired by WrestleFest and stuff like that. And Chikara has a game coming out. That's actually happening, it seems like. But there's so much potential. Did I disappear for a second? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. That's okay.
There's so much potential for it's not like football.
Right.
You can have a non-branded wrestling game and it will be fine. Sometimes sometimes the it's if you have a good creator engine, you can make anything at this point.
You know what I would love to see, and I've said this about some sports games, but a wrestling game in VR, not like a first-person view, but where you're sitting in the stands, like in the first row in the arena, watching the wrestling take place. But it's in VR, so you look left, you look right, and you see the guys kind of come at you and away from you. And I think that could actually be really cool.
Like you could be at ringside and they'd be right in your lap almost. You know?
I mean, what if you were at the announcer's table and you're like doing the announcing for this game, but you're controlling it, and they flip stuff onto the table in front of you, and I mean, that could be kind of cool. VR could actually lend to some pretty interesting.
It would be like that
wrestling
weird,
ideas.
PlayStation VR game, that Hatsune Miku PlayStation VR game.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
You can just teleport around the arena and watch it from any you want to get on the stage? Get on the stage.
Why not? Well, here are some of our listeners and readers or Twitter followers mention of some of their favorites. Fats Yuma at Yuma Booma says that WWF Attitude for PS1 because the roster was sweet, music was excellent, and they have a good memory, so button combos were no trouble. We mentioned about PS1 games with the button combos.
I will mention that Yuma is a professional wrestler.
Really?
He's a friend of mine. And
excellent.
He's I guess I'll accept him saying I won't agree with him, and I'll tell him that, but
Ponderous Dre at DeAndre Brown V3 says WWE SmackDown, here comes the pain, because it's a total package and has something current WWE games don't.
Yeah, it was that thing, like, you know how when the new era rolls around, you start losing features while they catch back up, but it was like a fully featured game.
Yep.
When it came out, it felt full, like, you know, the whole backstage areas and stuff. Like, we're just now getting back to allowing backstage areas. Like, you weren't fighting backstage in the most recent WWE games, but 2K17, you can fight backstage again. Like, yeah.
That's I might have to get that. I have 2K16 thanks to the games with gold. On an Xbox, so I might start with that first and then hop into 2K17.
Just they don't change, and they're not the best, but I still really always enjoy myself when I play. There's a trick with 2K17 is the worst part of 2K16 is the submission system. It's absolutely miserable and almost impossible to like escape from something. Like, there's a trick to it that nobody knows what the trick is. And so in 2K17, they changed it. Like, they didn't change it. By default, it's exactly the same as 2K16, but you can go in and make it a button press mini game instead, which is the only way to really enjoy yourself, because you will find yourself losing matches for no reason if you go with the original method.
Well, last but not least, Chris Newnham, a good friend of ours at Capradork, says ECW Hardcore Revolution. I knew nothing about ECW, but the hardcore match types were awesome, especially barbed wire ropes.
Yeah, they really,
I'd forgotten about the ECW games.
They kind of went for it with the ECW games. There was like a brimstone match that, like, you throw your opponent outside and they just land on lava and burn up, like they die. Like, that's
like actual wrestling, surprisingly. I have to get going to my movie right now because it starts in 10 minutes and my theater is 12 minutes away. I'm going to have to cut this short, but we were going to do predictions for Roadblock. I think we'll do them over Twitter. Yeah. And then we'll just kind of review them at the next week's podcast. And it'll help me recover a little bit. I'm still under the weather. This weather has been horrible here and everybody got sick. So I'm recovering. But thank you, everybody, for submitting your comments on the wrestling games. Feel free to submit even more comments. I'm pointing down as if it means anything in the podcast and the YouTube.
Click the like button here.
Click the like and subscribe. Click the subscribe and the like buttons. And let us know your favorite wrestling games. We always find that interesting and stuff to talk about on future episodes. But again, you can find us at sidequesting.com, at sidequesting. Our Twitter handle will probably be SQW Podcast, but give me one more week to get through this illness, and everything will be up and running.
I'll use that Twitter account to just talk bad about professional wrestling.
I love it. You can find me personally at Dali Domovsky. JJ, where can they find you?
At @the_double_J.
And John?
At John Kehoe, JONKEHOE.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on the next SQW Wrestling Podcast.